right now with 97.3 ESPN.com. Phillies insider Frank Klose says, Frank, I don't know about you, but a 67-page document about the restrictions to play baseball, are they even allowed to throw a pitch?
I think that what happens in this organization or any organization, you want to make sure that your handbook is pristine so that anything is accounted for that could possibly come up. And they say that this 67-page document is sort of like a living, breathing document. They expect it to change. They expect new things to come in. Maybe things come out. I mean, I teach in universities, and as we're trying to figure out how to get back to teaching, we're doing the same exact thing. And I'm sure a lot of other businesses are doing the same thing. You know, you got to account for almost everything because, let's face it, we require human interaction in pretty much any job.
No question. How much of that, though, makes it less likely that the players are going to accept some of this stuff because of the immense restrictions?
Well, I think that there's some sense of if you read through the whole thing, Ken Rosenthal, The Athletic, along with Evan Drellich, really wrote a nice breakdown of that on The Athletic. So I recommend that people read it. You know, I think it's so inclusive that perhaps an athlete could look at it and maybe start to feel comfortable. Interesting things, for example, no spitting, no blowing on your hands, no, rubbing your eyes while you're on the mat. Some of that stuff is probably so innate to everybody. I think they might be afraid of accidentally doing it, but I think overall, if everybody follows the rules best that they possibly can, even if there's a slip up or two, it'll still give people some sense of security. I mean, they've really looked into, at least from the summary from Rosenthal and Drellich, they've seemed to consider almost every possibility here, like the fact that your lineup cards will be on apps, so you don't even have to hand the lineup card to somebody else. And that's pretty that's some pretty detailed investigation into every little aspect of the game.
Gil and I were kind of talking about how, when you hear all these rules, no spitting, no high fives, and maybe having to wear masks, some of these people that are on the field, the first base coach, third base coach, doesn't this almost feel as if it's not safe? And this is supposed to be to the point where they're getting tested, so you do feel safe. It's almost as if there's so many rules that it's almost scary to be out there and they don't feel comfortable.
That's a good question. And let's face it, there are a lot of baseball players in professional baseball, so some of them might have varying opinions. I think that's going to happen no matter what. But maybe this is the time too. Then you talk about coaches and relaying signals. I mean, maybe there's a helmet, like a helmet radio that a football player might have. When do you start to use some of the technology? Can you have a little Bluetooth device in someone's ear that saves you some of that? Hey, maybe it'll even speed up the game. For those that are really worried about speeding up the game, if you could just sort of patch yourself in as the coach. Just tap your little Bluetooth device and say, all right, I want you to take off on the second pitch. That could be a lot easier than having coaches physically right there and calling timeout. So who knows?
I mean, why don't they just give these guys a wristwatch, an iWatch, and then text them the signs?
Yeah, I think that's. I'm sure anything like that could happen now. I mean, it's this is the time to experiment, right? I mean, this is not going to be a regular Major League Baseball season, so certainly they had the issues with people stealing signs and then using those iWatches. So maybe that alone is enough to give them a little pause from that. But yeah. I mean, there's got to be something. I mean, little earpieces and helmets as batters are running the bases. I mean, that's very, very doable, right? They do it in football.
Right, absolutely. Frank, John Heyman just tweeted about a half hour ago that MLB is in recent talks gave the union two options. One, negotiate a new financial arrangement, something other than the prorated pay for players playing games with no fans in attendance. Or two, wait for the coronavirus to clear to the point where fans can attend games. MLB has been looking at a 50-50 revenue split beyond the scenes. and no formal proposal has been made to the players yet. In any case, players do seem very much resolved not to agree to a revenue-sharing proposal on principle. They view it as a form of a salary cap and a bad precedent. So those are the two options that Heyman has said: negotiate a new financial agreement or wait for Corona to clear. So positive news or negative?
You know that they were trying. Now, one thing that Heyman did point out too in that Twitter thread was, at no point did Major League Baseball actually propose a 50-50 split. That was one of those things that was sort of leaked out there, and as Hunter and I and Jeff Mosher have talked about on the podcast frequently, a lot of this is strategically leaked, right? So even though they never, the Major League Baseball executives can say to the Players Association, well, we never said that. Well, meanwhile, they had 80 million people report it, right? That's usually how it goes. But that seems to be the case. They've never actually formally offered a 50-50 split. So you kind of knew something was coming. And I guess from the perspective of the players, that's a worrisome precedent that you can just make your income dependent upon what comes in. They don't want to do that. They want to have their guaranteed contracts at the guaranteed amounts. And for me, I think that the players will have to give something back. And if it were me, I would simply try to defer some of the salaries until the day comes when perhaps the fans are filling the stands again and they can get some of the revenue back. I mean, let's face it, this is going to affect things down the line. And, even from the players' perspective, you want to protect the main principles here, but, we talk so much about JT Realmuto and his impending free agency, right? So if next year there's going to be so much less money in the game, the free agents are not going to be signed to contracts that they would have otherwise done had there been no financial interruption, right? So there's going to be a natural effect where down the line the negotiated salaries probably are going to take a little bit of a hit because teams are simply not going to have the money. You get to the point where the big teams with lots of money basically sign players up to their ability, and then the small market teams are probably not signing anybody. So there are some problems down the line, and that might be in the players' interest to try to find some creative way to give something back. And I think that if you agree to defer some money, that might be the best. Not in a Bobby Bonilla kind of way where they pay you forever. But there's got to be some sort of give back because I get the players' perspective. They don't want to set a new precedent that might be hard to undo for the future. But I think if baseball said, look, when we get our money again, can we pay you later? Some players might be okay with that.
Yeah, it's interesting to look at it from the perspective of some unrestricted free agents and how that's going to impact the market moving forward. But it all ties together with the unhappy players. And one of the biggest unhappy players this past week was Blake Snell. And he said he won't play because he feels unsafe, and he would play, though, if the money was correct. So what are your thoughts on that? Because to me, I see it as, he's using not feeling safe as leverage because he wants to get paid more money.
I think we even see this. And I was thinking about this a lot because we were talking about it on our podcast, which you can hear tonight. But even a lot of the workers that ended up on unemployment because of losing a job or whatever, the prospect of going to work for what seems to be, relatively speaking, not the same amount of money, especially at a time where everything's stressed in life and, childcare is super hard to find and other types of challenges exist. You want to feel some sense of security. Now, I know that Blake Snell, who just signed a new contract that's just really kind of kicking in and it's worth $50 million. I mean, he's about to start getting his big payday, and I guess it's relative on a much different scale. But if you just feel that there's going to be such a hit to your salary, let's say right now somebody making $60,000 a year, and they say, well, you can come back, but we'll pay you at a rate of $40,000. You might take a step back and just say, well, look, this isn't an ideal situation to work. Why would I agree to that? Even though, yeah, it's nice to have some money coming in. So I kind of see where he's coming. But I can also understand why some people take a little bit of offense to that because he is a millionaire, right? You know, if you think about it on a lower scale, if my job wanted me to take a pay cut next year and say, well, you're going to teach the same amount of classes, but you know, since you're not driving to campus, maybe you're teaching online. We're going to pay you at 70%. Well, I mean, I'd say, well, that's silly, right? You know, so I can see it applying to other jobs as well.
All right, Frank Klose, 97.3 ESPN.com. I guess we'll leave with this because a lot of the things that are going on, I feel like it's this 50-50 revenue split. And if they don't move off of that, I mean, are we going to be at an impasse?
Well, I think they'll get somewhere. I think that because I think that 50-50 split was leaked out and, as Heyman said, was not actually negotiated in a formal way. I think they were testing the waters, and then the waters are not welcome to a deal like that. They're not welcoming to that deal. So I think they're going to try to find other creative solutions. I think that the MLB is being honest. They're going to take major revenue hits, and if you look at, there's all kinds of different numbers, different mathematicians have come up with, but a game per game without a fan is just even one game. If you consider you sell 50,000 tickets, average $50 each. I mean, you can do the quick math. That's a big hit. So I can see that there's there's probably a path forward. It's probably going to have to involve both sides giving something up they don't want to. But I'll say this too: we've seen the price of these franchises in recent years. Sometimes when you take a loss on your balance sheet for one season, your franchise still goes up in value. So you're making the money in another way down the line. So if the players can kind of point that out, that you might not be, you might have I don't know, I'm just throwing a number. If you have a $10 million loss this year, maybe it's not a $10 million loss because your franchise value has gone up, and it goes up 10% every year if you look at some of the numbers. So I think they'll get somewhere. I think it's very, very clear, though, that this revenue split is probably not going to fly with the MLBPA. So they're going to have to do something.
All right, Frank Klose, more in the Powder Blue podcast, 6 to 7 tonight, including an interview with Phillies prospect Luke Leftwich. Check that out tonight, 6 to 7 o'clock, right here on 97.3 ESPN. And you can get that early on our website, 97.3ESPN.com. All right, Frank, thanks a bunch, pal.
Great to talk to you guys.
Yeah, man. Frank Klose, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline.